The older I get, I think the more important it is to me that games are interesting rather than successful. Which is not to say that a well-made, perfectly polished game isn't something to be respected as well. Japanese auteur and game designer Goichi Suda is often criticized for being mostly style over substance. And honestly, I can kind of see why. Because while I was playing Killer 7 most recently, I was struck by such an incredible sense of style and aesthetic that the game has, despite the gameplay itself being a little bit lackluster and repetitive. Killer 7 is basically what would happen if you split the difference on a point-and-click adventure game and, say, a first-person on-rails shooting game. Essentially, you control one of the 7 members of the Smith Syndicate, a assassin organization that carries out assassination jobs for the government. The story is more complex and intricate than that, but really you don't need to understand the story to get the gist of the game. The game itself is broken up into, would you believe it, 7 missions, of which you control the Smith Syndicate and lead them throughout the level, killing members of the Heaven Smile terrorist group and solving object inventory puzzles like you would in an adventure game. Each mission starts with a different predetermined amount of characters unlocked at the beginning, but as you progress through the level and kill more enemies, more of them will be able to be unlocked in the save room menu. At the end of each mission, you should have all of the characters unlocked. This is important because characters not only function kind of like different weapons would in a first-person shooter, having different attack speeds, reload times, attack powers, and charge abilities, each of the individual characters also possesses a special skill that they can use to interact with the world. There is a criminal who can lockpick things, a woman who can open secret passages using blood, etc. I played the most recent PC port that came out in 2018, which lets you use the number keys to switch between the individual Smiths. But in the original game on the GameCube and the PS2, you had to go into the menu and switch them manually, which I can definitely see being annoying and taking a lot of time to do. As it stands, even with the keyboard shortcuts, you still have to wait for the animation to play each time. The puzzles in this game, if you can even call them that, are almost insultingly simple. And if you had a hard time figuring them out on your own, there's a built-in hint system and a reoccurring NPC that basically tells you exactly what character you need to do exactly what thing. On top of this, in addition to those things, it also marks areas on the map that you can interact with things with different characters' portraits. As you progress through the game, you also pick up different elemental rings that let you solve puzzles as well. These will also be marked on your map when you need to use them to interact with things. Now don't get me wrong, I'm saying all this stuff up front to illustrate the point that while this game has some interesting concepts in it, it's by no means a perfect execution of really any of those concepts. But what it is a perfect execution of is incredible style. The high-contrast cel-shaded graphics absolutely ooze atmosphere, combined with the incredible musical composition and the story presentation itself. While I was playing the game, I was mostly meandering through boring environments and kind of lackluster gameplay just so I could get to each next story beat, which seemed more crazy and far-fetched than the last story beat. There are 2 reoccurring characters that pop up throughout the game in ghost form, the first being Iwazaru, who seems to be some sort of Valdo man who gives you hints about the level coming up and different things that you need to do, and Travis, who drip feeds sort of interesting background knowledge about the political landscape of the world of the game that you're playing in. The game basically starts out going 100 miles per hour and increases each level. The first mini-boss that you encounter is a surreal angel girl complete with stereotypical anime head. Boss of the second mission is two members of Japanese parliament whose heads have popped up and shoot brains at you. The way that you defeat them is by shooting one's tie so the other reaches over to fix it and exposes his weak spot. Next mission has you traveling to a prefabricated town in Texas where a man has created a super corporation that has taken over the town, only for it to be revealed later that the corporation itself is just a fake and it's just a giant cardboard facade. Ideas in this game are so crazy that you couldn't even make them up if you wanted to. It's so incredibly interesting to me that the things that we think of as hallmarks of Suda51's work now, stylish graphical presentation, the offbeat humor, the weird obsession with masked wrestling, it's all here in his very first American game. And it's so completely distilled, in the same way that I feel like a lot of Deadly Premonition feels exactly like what Swery wanted to make in a video game, minus the obviously shoehorned in combat sections. This game feels very essentially like a Suda51 game. And I think I'm really starting to find that I appreciate this presentation in games, that sort of distilled essence of a game maker so purely expressed in the media form. Now, to be honest, the plot itself is not great, or at least it's pretty hard to grasp. It's drip-fed to you over the course of the game and doesn't really do a very good job of explaining its concepts, though it does flesh out the world a lot. What actually goes on in the minute-to-minute gameplay is a little bit obscure. And honestly, this doesn't really bother me that much. It seems like the narrative way of telling the game story and the plot devices that it engages in are more to create an atmosphere than actually to present a cohesive narrative. Which is not to say that I don't think Suda51 knew what he wanted to do with the game or the story that he wanted to tell when he started making it, but more that the actual minute-to-minute beats are the more interesting part of the game, and the overarching, broader strokes of the story are the less important part. One of the things I find most notably interesting about this game is just how mature it is, for lack of a better word.
We're talking guys who beat off 4 times a day. This is an epicenter of energy, man. But this Stacy they love, she's an illusion. But in the new age, there's no fooling them, no sir. They won't be tricked by illusions anymore. Oh my God, I can't hold back. Oh God, I'm coming. Yeah! See, I told you, this is real.
And to think that this was originally supposed to be a GameCube exclusive. This is the company that used to censor all religious iconography in video games, that changed alcohol into juice or milk, and times would retranslate dialogue scenes or retouch sprites to get rid of nudity, US releases of games, simply for the fact that they thought that they didn't meet its high moral standards. Honestly, the violence in this game is the least shocking thing about it. Characters constantly spit expletives. There is a specific character who just says, "You're fucked. You're fucked," every time that he gets a critical hit on enemies. The decapitated head of Susie, who usually imparts to you elemental rings in every level, will also tell you a story about how she gleefully and graphically murdered somebody using Japanese emoticons at the same time. I certainly remember when the game Mad World came out in 2009 for the Wii, everybody made a really big deal about it being an M-rated game that was so gory and so crass coming out on a Nintendo console. Killer 7 had him beat to the punch 3 years prior. Honestly, even despite all of the flaws I find in the gameplay, I think this game is so fun and so interesting that I would highly recommend anyone who's interested in Suda51's work, or just interested in something that feels distinctly artistic in terms of how games are made, to check out this game. It's incredibly affordable on Steam and really easy to run on pretty much any machine. Thank you, as always, for joining me for another episode. If you enjoyed what you saw or found my discourse on video games interesting, then please feel free to subscribe, hit that like button, ring the bell, do all the notification stuff. I love to see feedback from people who enjoy or even have things to say about the videos that I make. Until next time, though, please take care of yourself. I love you all.